I'd like to give you a little overview of the recall board in a MedEx-enabled practice. I'm Ray McGoran with MedEx, and I'm happy to show you this feature. What you're looking at is a production version of OpenEMR, somewhere above 5.0, and we've redacted the names and telephone numbers to keep this HIPAA compliant. If you were a non-MedEx practice, this is what you would see minus these. If you created your own interface to Twilio or some other texting service, you could get those to show up by including the messages in the database tables. But because we're a MedEx practice, these were automatically done. Let's take a look at what our board looks like. We go into globals and to connectors, and we activate the MedEx communication service. We've already signed up, it's already logged in. But by changing this, the recall board, every time we access it, it goes and checks MedEx and sees if there's a connection capable, and if there is, this is the board that we see. You'll notice a couple of things. There's a MedEx recall schedule, which is a representation of the messaging service options that we set up for recalls. And then there's a color-coded system that the recall board has acquired. You can look at everything. You can look at things that have events scheduled. Let's move this out 1 month rather than look close. And we'll look at events that are scheduled to happen. So there's text messages set to go out on 9/5 for these two patients, basically to say your recall is due, it's time to call in. Anybody that's already had something done, whether it was a text message, email, in our case we do both of those only, it'll show up in process and the progress will be noted here. So a text message went out on 5/11, there was no response. A label was printed on 7/10 and a phone call was made. On this patient on 7/10, Sherelle Lumpkin created a note. She said that she called the patient on 7/10/17 and left a message on the machine. Simply by filling it in this space, it'll show up as a note over there. You can still send a postcard. You can still create labels. You can create labels for everybody or just one at a time. Once you print that, that'll print it out. Same with postcards. Or an office phone. You can phone the patients right from the recall board. You'll have their full name here. You'll have their phone number here, what to call. And finally, what you'll have in this area is the modalities that the patients have allowed you to use, how to contact them. If text messaging is possible and allowed, it'll show up here. If it's not, there'll be a big X across it. This patient either didn't allow it or doesn't have an email. Because there's no email listed here, that's the reason, perhaps both. Here's a couple of patients that have the email listed. And let's see, the permission is allowed, so we can send an email, and indeed, an email was sent for that patient, but it's yellow, which means they did not respond. Once an appointment is made, again, in the recall board, these will disappear. The difference between this and the MedEx-enabled board is that for 1 day after the appointment is made, it'll show up in the board as green. You'll have a sense of feeling of accomplishment, but right now the secretary in this practice has not actually completed any recalls within the last 24 hours. Some of these are old, and at what point do you say, well, they're not coming back? You can put a note in here to say no more recalls, and then delete it. When you delete it, it just simply makes it invisible on the flow board, but it is still accessible in the database should you wish to go back and look at recalls that are old. Your other option is to change this to the current date. The current date today is the 22nd of August, and we filtered by that. And all the old, if we're looking at all these, all the old ones disappear. We only have the current active ones. Let's see what happens if we go back, I don't know, a couple days. 10, 12 days. Yeah, same thing. So those recalls that we were looking at were, quote, in process, were all remote ones. And a policy needs to be developed for our office on what to do with those people. We try them one more time. We send them one more label, one more postcard. And do we do that en masse? If we wanted to do it en masse, we'd hit in process. We'd look at all of these and say, yeah, we're going to send out a mailing label, put it on our thing, print them all out, and the secretary can send them all off at once. Hopefully that's a nice introduction to the flow board. If you don't want to use the Bootstrap submenu here, you can simply hide it, and that will remain as a preference for you. You can re-enable it at any point in time. Thanks, and look forward to the next video where we're going to get into the flow board, both the new flow board that's responsive to screen size via Bootstrap, as well as a MedEx-enabled version of that. Thanks.